Hello, everybody. I am Danielle Posa, and I've been working with Geoff behind the scenes on this workplace well-being content. I'm excited to be here with you by video. I do wish I could be there in person, but I am based in the States, so this is probably the easiest way to go for now. So I know Geoff just spent some time walking you through the framework, and the framework really highlights the components, all of the various components that are at play when it comes to what's impacting the well-being and the lives of your employees. So now I'm going to spend about 10 minutes or so just, walking through how do you, take all that information and start to put this to work within your organization. How do you really start to craft a well-being strategy? So there are really 5 major phases to rolling out, a strategy. And before I dive into this, I will just preface this by saying that this is really meant to be a strategy that is rolled out over the course of 3 to 5 years at least. When you're truly committed to improving the well-being of your employees, it's really a lifelong commitment. It's really something that will always be, happening in the background for as long as your organization is in existence. But I say that because as we go through this isn't something that you'd be expected to implement this year or even the next 2 years. But definitely, you'll be able to kind of get the ball rolling and get started. But I don't want it to feel overwhelming and have you think that you have to be doing all of this within the next year or so. So the first phase to this is build. If you want this to be a long-term strategy, you have to put the right pieces in place and really lay a foundation, especially at the leadership level. You have to build the proper buy-in amongst the leadership team so that this gets taken seriously and so that it isn't something that is just, a kind of a trend or something that happens post-pandemic, but is a serious commitment. So to create that proper buy-in, to build, build kind of or lay the foundation for this, you have to first start with a really good business case for well-being. And this should involve some of the economics around why well-being is so important, but the business case should really be customized to your organization. You want to take the time to build that case and show some of the pain points the organization is experiencing. Really build that case that's going to make sense to your leadership team and make this compelling. Another piece of the build phase is to make sure you have a sufficient team in place. Make sure that you have somebody who's accountable for well-being in your organization and accountable for culture in general. And then having a network of well-being champions. This can actually be employees across the organization. There are always employees who are passionate about well-being, and there might be employees who are passionate about a specific piece of well-being. Some might be passionate about financial well-being. Some might be more passionate about the physical health. Some more on the mental health. But find who those people are because they get excited to participate and to kind of drive this change within your organization. And obviously that means, not having to hire people externally, which I do think you also need to hire people, for roles in particular, but you also want to harness the potential of that talent that already exists. And then last but not least, actually taking the time to build the overall strategy, whether it's some kind of summary of what I'm about to go through here, but really, getting the leadership team aligned on the fact that this is a strategy that is here to stay. This is something that you're committing to over the long haul and showing what that looks like. The second phase is to educate the organization around the core concepts of well-being. A lot of companies make the mistake and they make the mistake of skipping this piece. Well-being is a complex topic. It's very confusing for people, and properly defining it and having a framework to align the organization around is so important before you get to the later phases, because this is what really empowers the organization to be able to talk about it in the same way. It creates that alignment between employees and the leadership team. So you want to educate them, whether that's through a series of classes and sessions around what is well-being, how does it differ from engagement and burnout, and make sure to kind of create that synergy. The third phase is to properly evaluate well-being. This to me is like the glue to the whole thing. It drives me crazy when leaders say that they're committed to well-being and they want to quickly put something in place. But if you're not measuring, if you don't know what your well-being score is, if you don't know exactly where you stand when it comes to burnout and these different elements of your culture, this will never be a long-term initiative, because you'll never be able to see how you improved. You'll never be able to track how your business performance is being impacted when you move the needle on well-being. So you have to make sure that you properly measure it. And I always say measure it as opposed to just a survey. There are a lot of junky surveys out there, or that ask the wrong questions or ask too many questions. A real good measurement of well-being asks the right questions and enables you to put some kind of score on that. I know Geoff and I have a lot to say about doing this properly, and we have some vendors that we recommend in terms of the ones that we do feel like do a good job at this. So we'd be happy to talk to you about that after if needed. But the evaluation phase also includes, beyond the measurement, includes actually conducting qualitative interviews. I do this a lot with my clients where I interview employees or the leaders to find out, what does well-being look like for them? Where are they struggling? What does that burnout look like and feel like? What are the causes of it? If you conduct these kinds of interviews within your organization, it makes a big difference, because it adds the kind of the color and the stories behind the numbers, which makes the whole thing a lot more compelling, and it helps you, it just helps really humanize this, which gives you the ammo to really keep going and to keep your well-being strategy alive. The evaluation phase also includes auditing your current programs, policies, practices around well-being. You can look at what you currently offer. What resources do you already provide, whether that's in, financial or physical, or what initiatives and programs do you have, perks, in place right now, that then you can align against a framework to get a sense of where you might need to add more resources and programming, and where maybe you're already doing a good job. The fourth phase is called eradicate. So before you really start to implement anything, you have to look at your evaluation and that measurement and identify what those organizational barriers are. I know that Geoff touched on those briefly a bit ago. If you have those elements of toxic culture, meaning if you have, employees who are working extremely long hours, or that feel that they're being micromanaged, or they're being treated unfairly, or they feel that leadership doesn't really value their well-being, you have to address those first. You have to eradicate those barriers before you move on, because otherwise anything that you do implement will kind of fall on deaf ears, because employees will just kind of feel like it's not a genuine, it isn't a genuine attempt to help them if those core issues and those toxic elements aren't removed first. And then last but not least is the empowerment phase. So this is really about properly developing your leaders, making sure you're really investing in conscious leadership development, training your managers. We all know, I think, that managers are experiencing the most amount of burnout nowadays, and a lot of that is because they feel this pressure to take care of their people. They don't know how. They're usually not given sufficient people training. So making sure that your manager is trained to have well-being conversations, to check in properly with their employees, and giving them what they need to manage their own well-being is so important. And then empowering your employees is really its own kind of category, because this is everything around giving them programming, giving them their own kind of trainings, and that's where all of your perks and resources and all of that comes in. So again, these are kind of the 5 major phases. This should take place over the course of at least 3 to 5 years, so don't get overwhelmed by this. They don't necessarily happen in exactly linear fashion. These are, can kind of overlap with each other, but this kind of gives you a good base of where to start. And then just to give you an idea of how this will look, when well-being is properly infiltrated into the culture of the organization, it will show up in the entire employee life cycle. Well-being will show up in your core ideology. What does your mission statement sound like? What are your core values? Is well-being a part of those core values? In your job description, are you attracting employees by sharing, what you're doing to improve well-being in the organization, and do some of your policies and perks line up with that. Then when it comes to retaining them, is well-being part of your onboarding process? Are you showing employees that they're valued and that their well-being is being considered as they are in that onboarding process? Or are you just kind of throwing them into the thick of their job, which has been known to erode well-being? So you have to really think about the entire employee life cycle, and well-being. When well-being is truly a part of the culture, and when the strategy is really coming to life, you'll start to see how it is that it just naturally starts to show up in this entire life cycle. Okay, so that is it for me. Just checking my time. I think I was right on 10 minutes there. I believe you'll have some time to think about this a bit more. I hope that was helpful, and feel free to reach out to me directly if you have any questions about anything that I mentioned here. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the session.